It was a Tuesday morning, and the quiet routine of the Beacon Bistro was shattered. Two robbers shoved through the glass door, striding in with a purpose that silenced the clatter of silverware and the hum of conversation. The first, in a black hoodie and a cold gaze, raised a gun without a word. The second moved fast, his eyes scanning the room for any resistance. An icy silence fell, cutting through the morning symphony of Boston's South End. Then, the muffled, high-pitched voice of the first man, whom Carmen recognized as Leo the Lynx Novak, finally cut the air. "Nobody move. This is a robbery. Everybody on the floor." Before we get started, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories travel, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Now, let's get back to it. Enjoy the story. The crowded diner froze. The panic in the customer's eyes was palpable, a silent scream that threatened to erupt into chaos. Carmen, the 26-year-old waitress, was on her way to the kitchen, a precarious stack of dirty dishes balanced on one arm. Her own feet were planted on the cracked vinyl floor, but her mind was working with icy precision. She saw the petrified young mother, the elderly couple clinging to each other, and Martha, a regular she'd served for years, beginning to let out a panicked whimper in her booth. The gleaming black pistol in Leo's hands trembled noticeably, a contradiction to his cold gaze, betraying the nerves beneath the facade. "Okay," Carmen's voice rang out, surprisingly low and steady, slicing through the dead silence. She didn't scream. She didn't duck. Instead, she deliberately set the dishes down on the nearest table, the soft clink of china loud in the deadly quiet. Hands raised, palms open in a non-aggressive gesture, her strong coffee-colored eyes met the robbers. "It's all right, everyone. Stay calm. He's just getting the money." To Carmen, the terror on the robbers' faces and the desperation in the customers' eyes were just another form of crisis. For a waitress, terror was just another Tuesday, compared to the silent battle she fought every single day. What the armed robbers didn't see was the steel in her spine, forged by years of a much more intimate and constant struggle. What the other customers didn't see was the secret she was protecting, the reason behind her extraordinary calm. Her younger sister, 8-year-old Isabella Bella Morales, was fighting cystic fibrosis. The image of Bella, her wheezing breath, her brave smiles, was the lens through which Carmen saw the world. Every dollar she earned at the Beacon Bistro, a classic neon and vinyl joint in Boston's bustling South End, went toward mounting medical bills. A former nursing student just one semester shy of graduation, Carmen had traded a stethoscope for heavy trays. Her own dream put on hold to give Bella a little more time, a little more air. Rent was late. The transmission on her 2000s-era Honda Civic groaned in protest. Faint lavender circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but her expression was always one of unwavering focus. Staying calm under pressure wasn't a job skill. It was a life skill, forged in the constant threat to her sister's health. As Carmen soothed Martha with a reassuring glance, Julian Thorne, the reclusive and ruthless CEO of Thorne Industries, watched from his dark corner booth. A millionaire with a cutthroat reputation, Julian had been coming to the diner once a month since his wife's death, seeking an authenticity his skyscraper empire couldn't offer. He, who had been about to trigger his emergency alert, paused. But one man saw everything. He witnessed her extraordinary calm, not just bravery, but management. Grace under pressure. The robbery was over fast. The accomplice grabbed cash from the till, shoving the register to the floor with a crash. Leo, still slightly stunned by Carmen's reaction, stammered one last threat, and then, as abruptly as they'd arrived, the thieves were gone. They left a vacuum of relief and adrenaline that slowly began to morph into whimpers and hysterical sobs. The refusal. In the aftermath, police arrived, and the diner became an investigation scene. Carmen, sitting in one of the now empty booths, gave her statement with the same dispassionate clarity she would use on a nursing chart. She recalled details others, lost in panic, had missed. The accomplice's noticeable limp, the Nike Air Max brand on his sneaker, the way Leo kept his finger off the trigger. Her mind worked like a recorder, absorbing everything. Julian Thorne, who had silently observed the police work and Carmen's composure, finally stood. Before leaving, he approached the table where Carmen still sat, the cop's pen scratching on his notepad. He left a stack of $2,000 in $100 bills and a crisp white business card. "That wasn't fearlessness," he said, his voice low and gravelly, a contrast to the diner's cacophony. "That was management. Very impressive, Ms. Morales." Carmen watched him leave, her gaze fixed on the stack of cash and the card. She was in shock. $2,000. It was a lifeline. Isabella's next few rounds of expensive medication, a month of rent paid ahead. But the card, bearing the name Julian Thorne, Thorn Industries, and a private number burned in her mind. Once home, after making sure Bella was settled and asleep, Carmen searched the name, Julian Thorn. The results flooded in. Titan of industry, corporate predator, billionaire fortune, stories of hostile takeovers, mass layoffs, an empire built on ruthlessness. The millionaire was a legend, and the legend wasn't kind. She looked at the money, then at the card. Gratitude warred with cynicism. Why would a man like that seek her out? She suspected the money was bait, and the card was the hook. Was this some twisted game for a rich man, bored and looking for a new toy? She tucked the card into a drawer, hesitant, the fear of getting involved in something far bigger than herself overriding the temptation. It was safer, she thought, to stay in her familiar bubble of known struggle. 4 days later, the card, forgotten in the dresser drawer, was discovered by Isabella. The little girl, with a child's curiosity and eyes that shone through the tangles of her illness, held it up. "Mama," Bella said, her voice a little hoarse but full of excitement. "Look, the card from the nice man at the diner. You should call. He was nice. Maybe he wants to give you more money for my medicine." Isabella's pure, innocent hope, the memory of the light in her sister's eyes when she talked about having more air, and the brutal reality of her own situation, the Honda Civic bill waiting, the pantry nearly bare, shattered Carmen's cynicism. She had little left to lose. For Isabella, she would do anything. The first turning point. With a deep breath that carried the weight of 4 days of internal conflict, Carmen dialed the private number on the card. 1 ring, 2. Then, a deep, impersonal voice answered. "Thorn." "Mr. Thorn," Carmen began, her voice a little hesitant. "This is Carmen Morales, the waitress from the Beacon Bistro." A short, heavy silence. 4 days, Ms. Morales. Your indecision is notable. Either you're cautious or you're slow. Which is it? Carmen swallowed. Cautious. Good. Caution is an asset, but hesitation can be fatal. Be in my office, Thorn Tower, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Come prepared. The line went dead. The next morning, Carmen stood before a monolith of glass and steel that pierced the clouds, reflecting the blue Boston sky. Thorn Tower. In her best, and noticeably inadequate, interview outfit, a tweed blazer that had belonged to her mother, and a black pencil skirt that had seen better days. She felt like a grain of sand on a beach of diamonds. The elevator whisked her to the 92nd floor, a realm of plush carpeting, utter silence, and a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. Julian Thorn's office was a study in restrained power. Glass walls, a commanding dark wood desk, and in the background, the city of Boston stretched out beneath them, an intricate tapestry of rooftops, streets, and water. Julian Thorn stood with his back to the window, hands clasped behind him, as if he were the guardian of that view. He turned. His eyes scanned Carmen from head to toe, an appraisal that made her feel as though every imperfection in her clothes was being catalogued. "The money," Julian began, his voice low and controlled, "was for the entertainment. Your performance at the diner was a spectacle. But the card and the summons? This is business." He walked to his desk and gestured to the chair across from him. "I saw in you a rare skill, Ms. Morales. The ability to remain absolutely lucid under extreme pressure, to manage chaos, to calm a room, to see what others miss." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "I need someone with that skill. My executives are brilliant, but most have never been through an armed robbery. They handle spreadsheets, not human panic." And what he chose to do next wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a test and an offer. Julian offered her a new position, Special Projects Coordinator, reporting directly to him. The salary would make her head spin. The benefits would cover Isabella's needs. Her job would be to solve sensitive problems, using the exact skills of perception, strategic calm, and emotional control she had shown in the diner. "The rules are simple, Ms. Morales," Julian continued, cutting through Carmen's fog of shock. "Absolute loyalty and discretion. My world is ruthless. The other executives will see you as a threat, an anomaly. They will try to make you fail. If you fail, you are out. No second chances. You're playing with sharks, and they show no mercy to those who bleed." Carmen looked out the window at the city of Boston that, before, had seemed like a hostile place of bills and anxiety. Now, from this height, she saw a possibility, a chance for Bella, a chance for herself, Isabella's security and future, her own survival in a world of millionaires and sharks. "I accept," she said, her voice as steady as it was on the night of the robbery. The line had been drawn. She had crossed the threshold. It was the beginning of a story so incredible it would soon captivate the entire world, unraveling the truth behind a viral headline. Thorn Tower's high-speed elevator, a glass and steel tube that seemed to defy gravity, deposited Carmen Morales on the 92nd floor with a soft hiss. The door slid open to a realm of thick carpet that absorbed all sound, glass walls that reflected Boston's cerulean sky, and a reverent silence that stood in brutal contrast to the constant din of the Beacon Bistro. The air here was climate-controlled, carrying the subtle scent of expensive leather and veiled ambition, a fragrance of power Carmen had never imagined breathing. Her feet, still aching from her last diner shift, now sank into a softness that felt like it might swallow her whole. Carmen, the former waitress, was on her first day as Special Projects Coordinator. The title sounded grand, but she felt like an imposter, a stranger at a masquerade ball. Julian Thorne, the reclusive and ruthless millionaire, had thrown her into the corporate deep end, and she knew she had to learn to swim, or she would sink without a trace. Her office was a transparent glass box, strategically placed so anyone walking by could see in. It was a fishbowl, and Carmen could feel the stares, curious, dismissive, overtly hostile, piercing her through the polished walls. She was an anomaly, a dissonant smudge on a tapestry of expensive suits and Ivy League pedigrees. On her desk of glass and brushed steel sat only a sleek laptop and a neat stack of company manuals, thick enough to crush a dream. No picture of Isabella, no memento of the past to anchor her here. Julian had been clear, absolute discretion. As she paged through a manual on corporate governance, feeling like a fish out of water, her attention was caught by a muffled laugh from a group of executives in a nearby office cluster. They stopped abruptly when their eyes landed on her, their expressions shifting to instant frostiness. Carmen registered the message, "You don't belong here." An imposing shadow materialized at the entrance of her glass cage. Sterling Cross. He was the personification of corporate success, impeccably dressed in a tailored pinstripe suit that looked sewn onto his skin, blonde hair perfectly slicked back, a watch that was worth a year of Carmen's rent gleaming on his wrist. His smile was polished but never reached his cold, calculating eyes, which seemed to weigh every word before it was spoken. Sterling was the golden boy of the Mergers and Acquisitions division, an Ivy League legacy whose corporate pedigree seemed etched into his DNA. He saw Carmen not just as a threat, but as a personal insult, a blemish on an elite environment he had spent his life mastering. "Welcome to Olympus, Ms. Morales," Sterling said, his voice a half-octave too low, laced with a condescension that made the words land like hailstones. He didn't offer a hand, a clear show of disdain. "I trust your transition from table service to, executive services is going smoothly." He paused, lips curling slightly in a mock smile, waiting for a reaction. Sterling expected her to stand, to rush to greet him with deference, acknowledging his hierarchical and social superiority. He expected to see hesitation, nervousness. But Carmen, her calm forged in the heat of the diner's griddle, remained seated, her posture straight but relaxed. This forced him to lean down slightly to meet her eyes, a small and subtle power play she'd learned at the diner, where staying at a customer's level often de-escalated aggression. She had learned to read body language in the rawest of environments, stressed customers, angry cooks, and panicked robbers. "As smoothly as can be expected, Mr. Cross," Carmen replied, her gaze steady and unruffled, showing no trace of fear or subservience. "Thank you for the concern." Sterling blinked. A micro-expression of surprise and irritation flickered across his face before he masked it. Thrown by her lack of reverence and concise reply, he tried to test her, throwing out corporate jargon about interdepartmental synergies and leveraging non-core assets to maximize shareholder return. Carmen just listened, absorbing every word, every technical term, unintimidated. She was there to observe, to learn the human terrain of the company, just as she'd learned the dynamics of a packed dining room. Who was the rushed customer? Who was the chronic complainer? She smiled minimally, a smile not of acquiescence, but of assessment, letting him expose himself, revealing his own arrogance. "Well, I hope you're not in over your head. It's a different world from your old environment," he added, the implication that she was inferior, a waitress in a world of geniuses, hanging in the air like cigarette smoke. "Indeed," Carmen nodded, her tone neutral. "The chaos is quieter here, but the pressure is the same, if not greater. The consequences seem to be quite expensive." She glanced at the papers on her desk, as if the pressure came from the manuals, not from him. Sterling huffed, an almost inaudible sound of exasperation, and withdrew, a slight sneer on his perfectly sculpted lips. Carmen felt no satisfaction, only a cold confirmation. This man would be an obstacle, and a dangerous one. But she had faced bigger obstacles in her old job: flying plates, drunk customers, the constant fight against personal bankruptcy. This was just a new kind of plate to balance, with finer china, but the same human fragility. She returned to her manuals, immersing herself in the company files, mapping the people and the projects, a strategy that had saved Bella countless times. Know the enemy, know the battlefield. 3 weeks crawled by, each day a deeper dive into the culture of Thorn Industries. Carmen watched, listened, learned the language and the codes. She sat through hours of meetings, her phone silenced, absorbing everything like a sponge. Her focus was the same as when she was memorizing the symptoms of cystic fibrosis. Absolute attention to detail. The first real test came directly from Julian Thorn. He summoned her to his 92nd floor office. The silence there was so thick that ambition itself seemed to have weight. The view of the city below was overwhelming, but Carmen kept her gaze fixed on the man before her, the millionaire who had pulled her from her own private purgatory. "Ms. Morales," Julian said, without preamble, as was his style, gesturing to a projection screen displaying renderings of a glass and steel skyscraper. "We have a problem. The Harborview Heights project, an 80-story luxury condominium in downtown Boston, one of Thorn's biggest investments, is at a standstill. Construction has halted, and the media is starting to ask questions." He clicked to the next image. An old crumbling brick building, the last holdout on a block Thorn had already bought and demolished. "This is the final piece of the puzzle. It's occupied by one woman, Mrs. Agnes Reed, 75, a retired schoolteacher. She refuses to leave." Julian slid a thin file across the desk, almost empty of solutions. Sterling Cross led the negotiations. "We offered her 3 times the market value. We threaten legal action, but she has a stubborn pro bono lawyer and the sympathy of the local press. We've tried everything." He failed. "Mrs. Reed is costing us $1 million a week in delays and penalties. Solve it. I don't want her in court. I want her to walk away smiling." Carmen took the file. Sterling had failed. The memory of his icy smile echoed in her mind. She didn't have an Ivy League degree or years of M&A experience, but she had a skill that Julian, the millionaire, prized, and that Sterling, the golden boy, lacked. The ability to see people, to understand what moved them beyond money. Carmen didn't look for corporate tactics in the manual. She spent hours in the public library, not the corporate one. She searched city archives, scoured old property records, local newspapers. She discovered that Mrs. Reed wasn't just a retired teacher. She was a revered community figure with a long history. One mention caught her eye. Agnes Reed, winner of a 1982 lemon meringue pie contest, with a recipe passed down for generations. An irrelevant detail to Sterling, but an opening for Carmen. That same afternoon, bypassing the legal team and their advice for aggressive negotiation, Carmen bought a fresh lemon meringue pie from a local bakery, known for its old-fashioned recipes, and drove to Mrs. Reed's dilapidated building in the South End. She knocked on the door, not with the force of authority, but with the lightness of a visitor. Mrs. Reed, small and stubborn, with white hair in a tight bun and a wary look, opened it just a crack, the security chain still in place. "I'm not selling, and I told your lawyers to stop bothering me," Mrs. Reed snapped, her voice trembling but firm with the indignation of someone who had fought many battles. "I'm not a lawyer, Mrs. Reed," Carmen said softly, holding the pie out toward the crack in the door. The sweet, citrusy scent filled the air. "I'm Carmen Morales, from Thorn Industries, and I brought lemon meringue pie. I heard you make the best in the city, and I wanted to try the second best." Mrs. Reed hesitated. The suspicion in her eyes faded slightly, replaced by a flicker of curiosity and a softness. This wasn't the face of a corporate shark or an aggressive lawyer. It was the tired but warm face of a waitress who knew the value of a small gesture, of an unexpected human connection. Slowly the chain slid free, and she let Carmen in. Carmen didn't talk about the building or the money. She sat in the cramped living room, filled with books and memories, and she listened. She listened to Mrs. Reed's life, the decades spent teaching literature, the stories of her students, the value of knowledge. She heard about her late husband, Arthur, a Boston firefighter who died a hero in the line of duty 30 years ago, and how this place was her last physical connection to their shared life. Mrs. Reed showed her pictures, vented about loneliness, and the need to hold on to something that held priceless sentimental value. Carmen listened. She asked questions, and for a moment, Mrs. Reed wasn't a corporate holdout, but just a woman with a story. "Mrs. Reed," Carmen said, after hours of listening, when the teacup was empty and the lemon pie half gone. "What if your legacy, and Arthur's, could live on in the new building, not just in your memory, but for everyone to see? What if, on the site of your old garden, we created a public park named after Arthur, the Arthur Reed Memorial Garden, a green oasis right in the heart of the city, where people could rest and remember your husband, the hero he was? Mrs. Reed's lips tightened, her eyes moist. Carmen continued, "And what if Thorne Industries, in recognition of your passion for education, also funded a citywide book drive for underprivileged schools, the Agnes Reed Literary Initiative, in your honor? That would be your legacy, Mrs. Reed, something that would live on forever, far beyond the bricks of this building." Mrs. Reed's eyes filled with tears, this time of gratitude. No one had ever asked about Arthur with genuine curiosity. No one had ever cared about her love of books beyond market value. This waitress, a stranger to the world of suits and figures, had seen the person behind the property, the heart behind the stubbornness. Deeply moved, she signed the deal, not for money, but for honor and legacy. News of Carmen's success rippled through the 92nd floor like a shockwave. Sterling, seething, could barely hide his rage. Watching his loss be overturned by Carmen's empathy was a direct blow to his reputation as a ruthless negotiator. He had failed with threats, and she had won with a lemon meringue pie and a listening ear. It was humiliating. No sooner had Carmen solved the Mrs. Reed problem than Julian sent her to an even thornier challenge. "The Commonwealth Docks of Boston," Julian explained, his face an impenetrable mask. "We want to modernize the infrastructure, automate some loading and unloading processes. But the Longshoremen's Union is a tough nut to crack. The leader is Big Tony, the anchor Mancini, a man who built his career on hardball and confrontation. He's chewed up and spit out two of our best lawyers. It's a stalemate costing millions in delayed projects. Go alone. I don't want any more slick lawyers with negotiation theories that don't work. I want you to make him see the light." Carmen took the file, which contained only the union's history and details of the past deadlocks. No strategy, no plan from Julian. The trust was absolute, the pressure immense. Carmen did her research, not just on the numbers and the labor laws, but on the history of the Boston Port Workers Union. She found that the Mancini family had been in the unions for generations. Big Tony wasn't just a leader, he was a patriarch, the last of a long line of dock workers. His greatest fear wasn't losing a negotiation, but seeing his family's legacy of hard work and the dignity of his men disappear with automation and the arrival of massive computer-controlled cranes. He didn't just care about current jobs, but about the future of his men, their families, the continuation of a tradition. She found Tony in a dockside tavern on the outskirts of the docks, a place that smelled of stale beer, fresh fish, and honest sweat. The place was full of loud men, and Carmen, in her neat blazer, was the only spot of light in a sea of grimy t-shirts and faces weathered by sun and sea. Tony was a giant of a man, with arms as thick as logs and a gaze that looked like it had seen every storm on the Atlantic. He greeted her with a suspicious grunt, standing near the bar, a mug of beer in hand, as if ready for a fight. "Another suit from the Millionaire? What do you want, Blondie?" Tony boomed, his voice a challenging rumble. He was used to lawyers who came with legal terms and veiled threats. Carmen didn't confront him. She smiled slightly. "Mr. Mancini, I didn't come here to take jobs. I came here to build a future. Your future and the future of your men." She slid a rough map of the area onto the bar, drawn by her own hand, with a few circles marked. "Thorne Industries doesn't just want to automate. We want the union to be a part of it, not a victim of it. I understand that the most important thing to you is ensuring your men have a future, that their kids can carry on the legacy." Tony frowned, the surprise on his face almost comical. No one had ever opened a negotiation like this. "What's this for?" he asked, putting his mug down. "We want to fund a state-of-the-art training center, right here on the docks," Carmen explained, pointing to one of the circles on the map. "A center to retrain the longshoremen to operate and manage the new automated systems. Not to replace them, but to elevate them. So your men aren't just laborers, but logistics engineers, port technology specialists." Tony listened, his eyes searching Carmen's. "And who pays for it? And who guarantees the company won't just train them and then fire them?" "Thorne Industries will pay for the construction and operation of the center in full for the first 5 years. And the union will have a seat on the center's board, helping to create the curriculum, ensuring the training is top tier. The terms of the contract will guarantee that no current longshoremen will be laid off due to automation for the next 10 years, provided they participate in the training." Carmen paused. "This would ensure your union members not only keep their jobs, Mr. Mancini, but become experts in cutting-edge technology. That means better paying jobs, a stronger union, and a leadership position in the future of port technology, not just in Boston, but on the entire East Coast. It's about protecting your legacy and building a new one, not destroying it." The idea, framed in a way that spoke directly to his pride. His concern for his boys and the future of the union resonated deeply with Tony. The waitress had, once again, seen past the immediate problem to a man's underlying emotions and values. The deal, in all its legal complexity, was struck in less than a week. Tony, now an unexpected ally, called her the girl who thinks with her heart and negotiates with her head. Carmen Morales quickly became a whispered legend at Thorn Industries, nicknamed the Thorn Whisperer, the millionaire's secret weapon. Her successes, which Sterling and others had once dismissed as flukes or beginner's luck, were now hailed as undeniable genius, an intuition that outmatched any algorithm. Julian Thorn, with his shrewd gaze, just watched, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Carmen's life was transformed. Her salary and benefits lifted Isabella out of the limbo of medical bureaucracy. The little girl was enrolled in a clinical trial with a renowned pulmonologist at Boston Children's Hospital. Her treatments were updated with the latest innovations, and the prospect of a longer, healthier future finally became a tangible reality, not just a distant dream. They moved into a larger, brighter apartment in Cambridge with a view of the Charles River, where Isabella could watch the boats go by. That smell of mold and desperation from their old apartment was replaced by the scent of hope, of a new beginning, and the joyful noise of Isabella playing in her own room, with her own toys, was the sweetest melody to Carmen. Carmen's life was improving dramatically, and Isabella was thriving. It was a feeling of victory Carmen had never imagined possible, a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. For the first time in a long time, Carmen felt a peace, a false sense of security. She was in control, Bella was well, and she was proving herself in a world that was, by all accounts, impossible for a waitress. A local newspaper headline, still small but with a touch of fascination, called her Thorn's Midas Touch, an irony considering where she came from. But with each of Carmen's successes, Sterling Cross's simmering resentment morphed into a dangerous obsession. He couldn't believe this former waitress, with no formal experience, was eclipsing his years of elite training and networking, his gleaming degrees and impeccable connections. He was the heir apparent to Julian Thorn, the prince of Thorn Industries, and Carmen was a humiliating roadblock, an affront to his status and his lineage. Sterling began a subtle but relentless campaign of sabotage against Carmen. Key files for her projects would mysteriously vanish from their shared server or become undetectably corrupted. Invitations to important meetings would arrive late or be accidentally lost in spam folders he had configured. He twisted her words in executive briefings, framing her empathetic approaches as naive, inefficient, or even a waste of the millionaire's resources. He spread rumors that she was just Julian Thorn's exotic pet project, a distraction for the old board CEO. However, Carmen, accustomed to the chaos of a busy diner where memory and organization were keys to survival, was meticulous. She had developed a bulletproof system, copies of everything on external backups, email confirmations for every interaction, and an informal network of lower-level staff, administrative assistants, IT personnel, cleaning crews, who, grateful for her genuine kindness and respect, would tip her off to any strange movement or unexpected glitch. Every one of Sterling's sabotage attempts was thwarted, his petty lies undone by a flawless paper trail and discreet testimony. Frustrated and unable to best her on merit or through petty tactics, Sterling escalated his hunt. His arrogance had been wounded, and now he sought annihilation. He hired a private investigator, Rex the Hound Maxwell, an ex-Boston cop with a reputation for digging up deep, dirty secrets. Maxwell was a grizzled man with a penetrating gaze and a prominent scar on his right temple, evidence of years on the streets. Maxwell's mission: dig up something, anything on Carmen Morales' past that could discredit her, tarnish her, bring her down for good. Sterling gave Maxwell a blank check and one order: find her dirt, use whatever it takes. Maxwell dug into Carmen's life. He discovered her history as a former nursing student, the reason for her departure, Isabella's illness, the medical documents confirming cystic fibrosis, her long hours at the diner. He interviewed old co-workers, neighbors from her former apartment. Her life was an open book of sacrifice and dedication. There was nothing directly incriminating, clean, focused on work and her sister's health. Maxwell, used to finding skeletons, was shocked. The waitress was in fact the person she appeared to be. But Maxwell was a true hound. He didn't stop there. Intrigued by how Carmen had gotten on the radar of the millionaire Julian Thorn, he delved into the event that brought her to light: the robbery at the Beacon Bistro. A deep dive into police records revealed that one of the robbers, Leo the Lynx Novak, had been arrested weeks later for a smaller stick-up in another part of the city. The police report included Leo's mugshot, What was a dead end for most was, for Maxwell, a door. Maxwell's investigation continued to burrow deeper, following Leo Novak's trail, mapping his connections. And then, he found an unexpected link, disturbingly close to the epicenter of Thorn Industries. Leo had a brother, Finn Novak, a junior analyst at Thorn Industries itself. Finn worked in the risk assessment division, on projects overseen by none other than Sterling Cross. The coincidence was too glaring to ignore. Maxwell dug further. Weeks before the diner robbery, Sterling had personally covered up a minor financial discrepancy in Finn's department. An accounting error that, if exposed, could have cost the junior analyst his job and perhaps raised red flags in audits. It was a favor Sterling had done for a loyal employee, a small anomaly he had cleaned up quickly to avoid red tape and keep his team efficient. Days after this cleanup by Sterling, Finn Novak's bank records showed a $5,000 transfer to the bank account of Chloe Vance, the girlfriend of his brother, Leo Novak. The purpose? Undeniably for the diner robbery. The amount was significant, and the timing, devastating. Sterling received Maxwell's report in his corner office overlooking the harbor. His arrogantly confident smile vanished, replaced by a cold, heavy knot in his stomach. What had started as a hunt to destroy Carmen had turned into an imminent threat to his own career, his reputation, his freedom. He, Sterling Cross, the golden boy, the future of Thorn Industries, was hopelessly vulnerable. If the connection between Finn, Leo, the robbery, and his own cover-up was revealed, it would be the end. Not just the end of his career, but perhaps the start of a criminal investigation that could land him in prison. Sweat beaded on his temples. The scale of the conflict had shifted dramatically. From a corporate rivalry for prestige, it had become a fight to expose or hide a deep, dangerous corruption, tying him directly to the incident that brought the Waitress into this world. The very robbery Sterling wanted to use to discredit Carmen was, in fact, the noose he'd unknowingly tied around his own neck. Sterling's panic was palpable, his world, once so safe and predictable, crumbling around him. In a state of absolute panic, Sterling intensified his sabotage tactics against Carmen with a new, desperate ferocity. He was no longer just trying to humiliate her. He was trying to utterly discredit her, to destroy her credibility before she could accidentally stumble upon the truth about him. A truth he now knew was just one step away from being discovered. He planted more virulent rumors about her incompetence, about how she was manipulating Julian Thorne. He leaked false information to the press about her lack of qualifications, and even insinuated her past was questionable, hoping the fog of slander would envelop her before the real storm could hit. The pressure on Carmen became a constant hum, a buzz of veiled hostility in every hallway, in every glance. But she, as always, remained focused, her steely gaze unwavering. Julian Thorne, oblivious to Sterling's web of secrets and desperation, or perhaps willfully ignoring it, entrusted Carmen with a new high-stakes project to vet a potential partnership for the Thorne Foundation, the philanthropic arm of the Millionaire's empire. The top contender was the Bright Futures Alliance, a foundation with glossy brochures, stirring speeches, and powerful endorsements from political figures and celebrities. Sterling had been aggressively promoting it for months, positioning it as the obvious choice for a massive foundation investment. It seemed a perfect fit for Thorne's public image. From the moment she picked up the file, heavy with slick paper and optimistic reports, Carmen felt something was wrong. The kind of perfection the chaos of the diner had taught her to distrust. The mission statements were too vague, filled with inspiring cliches about community empowerment and opportunities for all, but devoid of any concrete details or measurable metrics of impact. The financials, while impeccably presented in colorful summaries and inviting graphs, were opaque in the details, with gaps and generic categories that masked the origin and destination of large sums of money. The scent of something too clean was familiar, the same kind of clean she'd noticed in the hidden corners of the diner that had been hastily wiped down to look more presentable. She employed her signature tactic, go to the source. Ignoring the polished reports and PowerPoint presentations, Carmen decided to step out of the glass office and see the Bright Futures Alliance in action for herself. She visited the community centers the foundation claimed to support in the South End and Dorchester, the very communities that had shaped her. She found underfunded facilities with peeling paint, ancient computers, and few, if any, children or adults making use of the programs. The tutoring classes, art workshops, and mentorship programs described in the brochures were mostly non-existent or running on a shoestring, sustained by exhausted volunteers, not the millions the foundation promised. The facade was as thin as brochure paper, easily peeled back by an eye trained to see past appearances. The Bright Futures Alliance was, in fact, an elaborate shell to siphon off corporate donations, a money pit for hidden pockets, draining vital resources from the communities it claimed to serve. To confirm her suspicions and build an airtight case, Carmen needed raw, internal financial data, the actual transaction logs, which the Foundation would never provide willingly. She drafted a complex request for a detailed forensic analysis of all transactions from the Bright Futures Alliance and its third-party vendors, directing it to Thorne's Risk Assessment Department. Curiously, the team managed by Sterling Cross. She also, with no one on the 92nd floor knowing the true reason behind the request, asked for the background and work history files of all the analysts who had worked on the Foundation's initial recommendation, justifying it as part of thorough due diligence to prevent future reputational risks. Her gut, sharp as a chef's knife, told her there was a human link, a glitch in the matrix, something a resume or a balance sheet wouldn't tell. She knew she was hunting a ghost in the system, and that ghost had a name and a face. The files landed in Carmen's inbox on a rainy Boston night, while Bella slept peacefully in her new, comfortable Cambridge room. The silence of the apartment was heavy, filled only with the soft click of her keyboard and the steady drumming of rain against the window of her new apartment, once so welcoming, now feeling oppressive. Carmen had been working nonstop for hours, the tension tightening in her chest. She opened the personnel folder of the analysts who had reviewed the Bright Futures Alliance first, a cold sense of foreboding washing over her. She scrolled through the names, reading descriptions and work histories, looking for any hint, any anomaly. Her eyes scanned the headshot of each face, each polished resume, each impeccable employment history. And then, she froze. The face of Finn Novak jumped out from the screen, an unmistakable resemblance to the mugshot she'd seen in the police reports. The same small, tense eyes, the same shape of the slightly crooked nose. He was the brother of the diner robber, Leo the Lynx Novak. Her visual memory, sharpened by the need to observe every detail in the diner, had not failed her. The air in her own lungs, so plentiful now thanks to her efforts, seemed to thin. Her blood ran cold, and a shiver traced its way down her spine. The world, once so safe and predictable in its newfound stability, began to spin. With hands that trembled slightly, a rare break in her composure, Carmen clicked on Finn's file. She saw his work history, junior analyst in risk assessment, and then the project. The most recent, the Bay State Logistics deal, a multi-million-dollar deal that had closed with great fanfare, overseen by Sterling Cross. And in the internal audit report, a discreet note, almost lost in the lines of text, but now glaring in its revelation, financial discrepancy flagged and then cleared by Sterling. It wasn't just an accounting error, it was an active cover-up. The espresso machine in the kitchen, once a sign of comfort, now sounded like a monster of white noise. It was terrifying. All the facts clicked into a horrifying constellation, a web of intrigue and corruption that stretched from the streets of the South End to the 92nd floor of Thorne Tower. Sterling Cross, Finn Novak, his criminal brother Leo Novak, the diner robbery. It wasn't a mere coincidence. It wasn't a matter of corporate rivalry. Sterling wasn't just an arrogant rival. He was a man with a dangerous secret, a deep corruption that began with his own ambition for shortcuts and connected directly to the inciting incident of Carmen's story, the robbery that had brought her into this corporate world, orchestrated by the brother of a man protected by Sterling. The web was far more intricate and personal than she had ever imagined. Carmen was alone with this explosive knowledge. The weight was crushing. The stakes were astronomical. Exposing Sterling meant unearthing the connection that incriminated him in Finn's cover-up, but that could also, by association, cast a devastating shadow on Julian Thorne's own judgment in hiring her. This millionaire had trusted her, a waitress he'd plucked from obscurity, and Sterling's failure, the corruption rooted right under his nose, would reflect on him, his reputation, his empire. It could even call the legitimacy of Carmen's recruitment into question. It would be a scandal that would shake Thorne Industries to its foundations. This was her lowest point. It felt like being back in the diner, but this time, the gun was pointed at her, and the panicked screams were internal, a chorus of fear and uncertainty. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, not just for her own career, but for Bella's safety, for the chance Julian had given her. To fight a corporate shark who was now cornered, with everything to lose, was more dangerous than ever. Sterling had nothing left to lose, which made him unpredictable, capable of anything to protect his facade. Carmen felt the chill of loneliness, the danger of fighting against the shadows of an empire that could easily crush her. Her success meant Isabella's safety, her failure, the end of everything, and perhaps the ruin of Julian. She gritted her teeth. The terror was real now, but the steel in her spine hardened. She would survive, and she would take Sterling Cross down with her. The screen of Carmen's laptop displayed the ugly, undeniable truth, its pixels shimmering like an open wound in the darkness of the apartment. Finn Novak, the diner robbery, Sterling Cross, and the conveniently cleared financial discrepancy. The knowledge was a heavy burden, but instead of crushing her, a cold fury began to kindle inside Carmen. It wasn't a hot, reckless rage, but the calculated resolve of a surgeon before a complex operation. She could not fail. Not now. Not when Isabella's safety and the future she had built were on the line. Carmen knew the Novak connection wouldn't be enough on its own to take down a titan like Sterling Cross. The millionaire Julian Thorne demanded more than just suspicion. He demanded irrefutable proof, an ironclad case. She turned back to the Bright Futures Alliance, ignoring the glossy brochures and diving deep into the raw payment data, the transaction logs, the vendor invoices. She cross-referenced, compared dates, searched for patterns, acting like a forensic detective but with the sharp intuition of someone who had learned to read between the lines of life. Hours bled into a night of caffeine and intense focus. That's when she found it. The largest payments from the charity weren't going to community programs, not to infrastructure development as Sterling's report suggested. They were being funneled to a small, obscure PR agency called Vance Strategies. Carmen typed in the name of Vance Strategies' owner, and the information popped onto the screen. Chloe Vance, Sterling Cross's girlfriend. The vicious circle was complete. A meticulous scheme to siphon funds from the Thorne Industries Foundation into Sterling's own pocket through his girlfriend's company, camouflaged under the cloak of philanthropy. The rot was systemic, and Sterling was at its center. Carmen now had undeniable proof. Not only had Sterling covered for an employee whose brother had robbed the diner, the very incident that brought her to Thorne, but he was also orchestrating a massive fraud under the guise of charity. This was a pattern of corruption, a misuse of trust and power that could not be ignored. The web of lies and deceit he had woven was now exposed. She compiled her findings meticulously. Every piece of evidence, every bank record, every email, every photo of the derelict community centers. She created a flawless presentation, visually direct and factually irrefutable. There was no room for dispute. The case was as precise as surgery. Then, with the same steady hand that once served coffee, Carmen sent an email, an urgent meeting request to Julian Thorne to discuss critical matters of corporate integrity and risk. And deliberately, strategically, she CC'd Sterling. It was a bold move, a gauntlet thrown down. Carmen knew it was all or nothing. She had exposed a shark in its own habitat, and now it was aware it was being hunted. There was no going back. The final battle was set. The executive boardroom on the 92nd floor was a temple of power, with a long mirrored mahogany table and leather chairs that felt like thrones. The air was electric. Sterling Cross was there, his face a mask of forced self-assurance. His eyes, however, flashing with a mix of anger and nerves. He smirked at Carmen, a cold, predatory smile, certain of his own impunity and ready to watch her stumble. He believed she had nothing of substance, just gossip from a waitress who had flown too close to the sun. The door swung open, and Julian Thorne entered. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft echo of his footsteps. Julian sat at the head of the table, his piercing eyes sweeping the room, landing on Carmen, and for a longer moment, on Sterling. He showed no emotion. "Begin," Julian commanded, his voice low and controlled, but with an authority that chilled the room. Carmen stood, the stack of documents and the tablet in her hands feeling surprisingly light. She took her position at the center of the room, before the large projection screen. Her voice was calm, steady, the same voice that had soothed a gunman. She made no accusations, she simply presented facts. Carmen's presentation was a clinical execution. She methodically dismantled the Bright Futures Alliance, slide by slide. She started with the financial data Sterling had presented, colorful graphs and empty promises, and then, with a click, she revealed the raw bank statements, the actual transaction logs. She showed the discrepancy. Millions of dollars, earmarked for community programs, disappearing into a web of shell companies. The color began to drain from Sterling's face. His arrogant smirk vanished. He tried to interrupt her. "This is a smear campaign, baseless accusations. My personal life is irrelevant to this business." Julian silenced him with a glacial look, without raising his voice. "Continue, Ms. Morales." Carmen ignored Sterling, her voice never wavering. She clicked to the final, visually arresting slide. On the screen, in perfect juxtaposition, were the photos of the Novak brothers, Leo, the robber, and Finn, the Thorne analyst. Beside it, a screenshot of Thorne's internal records, showing Finn's financial discrepancy, and the note, cleared by Sterling Cross. Below that, the $5,000 transfer from Finn to the account of Chloe Vance, Leo's girlfriend. And finally, the registration data for Vance Strategies, the PR agency receiving the largest payments from the Bright Futures Alliance, with Chloe Vance as the owner. "This isn't just a conflict of interest, Mr. Cross," Carmen stated, her voice now carrying an unshakable authority. "It is a pattern of fraud, a network of corruption you have woven, using the resources of this company, the funds of a charitable foundation, for your own gain. You covered for an employee who financed a robbery that, ironically, led to my hiring." She pointed to the screen. "This pattern of judgment, this misuse of power, this fraud in the name of philanthropy, he has become the single greatest risk on the 92nd floor. A risk to the reputation of Thorne Industries, to your integrity, Mr. Thorne." The silence in the room was absolute, heavier than lead. Sterling was ashen, his eyes wide, the glint of panic finally overpowering his mask of arrogance. He tried to stammer out an excuse, a justification, but the words wouldn't come. His world was collapsing around him. Julian Thorne remained impassive for a moment that felt like an eternity. He turned to Sterling, his eyes as cold and hard as diamonds. "Mr. Cross," Julian said, his voice low and deadly, without a hint of anger, only the cutting coldness of a man who had just had his trust monumentally betrayed. "Your career here, and perhaps at any other reputable firm, is over. Get your things. Security will escort you out. Immediately." Burly security guards who had appeared quietly at the door stepped inside and flanked Sterling. He was led from the room, his face twisted in a mask of shame, rage, and despair, his career in ruins, his personal empire of lies undone by a waitress he had fatally underestimated. Julian Thorne turned to Carmen. His gaze was one of deep respect, a rare expression on his usually impassive face. "Ms. Morales," he said, his tone softening slightly, "you didn't just identify a problem. You brought proof. You brought a solution. The position of president of the Thorne Foundation is now open. The job is yours. It's time we invested in real human potential, not just in buildings and profit, but in people." The story of Sterling Cross's spectacular fall and Carmen Morales's meteoric rise spread like wildfire through the corporate world, whispered in boardrooms and exclusive golf clubs. It was the kind of juicy gossip that fueled the wheels of power. But Thorne Industries, under the aegis of the millionaire Julian Thorne, managed to contain the media explosion, keeping the most incriminating details about the fraud and the Novak brothers a strictly internal matter. The documents were sealed, those involved dismissed with non-disclosure agreements. However, the true media explosion, the one that would captivate the entire world, came from an unexpected source. Emily Shaw, the granddaughter of Martha, the elderly woman Carmen had calmed in the diner during the robbery, was a rising journalist at a Boston-based online news site, The Hub Daily. Emily had a keen nose for human interest stories and was always searching for something that would resonate with the public. It was over a Sunday dinner that Martha, her voice thick with emotion, told her granddaughter the story of the angel waitress who had calmed her during the robbery at the Beacon Bistro. She talked about the woman's courage, her preternatural calm, and the strange millionaire in the corner booth who had left a $2,000 tip. Curious, Emily started digging. She went to the diner, interviewed Sal, the owner, who corroborated the story, describing the mysterious waitress and the man in the corner booth. "He never said much," Sal said of Julian, "but he always watched, and when that woman acted, well, he saw something." Emily, with her journalistic intuition, began connecting the dots. She knew Thorne Industries was behind the new Harborview Heights skyscraper. A call to the city planning department revealed the dedication records for the new park at the building's base, the Arthur Reed Memorial Garden. Intrigued, she looked up Mrs. Agnes Reed, the retired teacher who had been the last holdout. Emily interviewed an emotional Mrs. Agnes Reed in her comfortable new apartment, quietly financed by Thorne. The old woman, with tears in her eyes, couldn't stop praising the brilliant, empathetic woman from Thorne Industries, who had made the garden and the literary initiative possible. "She didn't come with threats, Emily. She came with a lemon meringue pie, and she listened." It was Carmen Morales. The pieces clicked into place in Emily's mind. The diner hero, the woman who calmed her grandmother, the negotiator who honored Mrs. Reed's legacy. She now worked for the reclusive billionaire, Julian Thorne. It was a story straight out of a movie. Her article, published a week later under the headline, "From Waitress to Vice President, the billionaire who hired Boston's diner hero," went globally viral within hours. The story was irresistible, terror, unexpected heroism, a mysterious millionaire, an unbelievable job offer, the triumph of character over the most adverse circumstances. Suddenly, Carmen Morales, the former waitress, was a household name, on every news broadcast, in every social media feed. Carmen, now confident and poised in her new role as president of the Thorne Foundation, handled the media storm with the same grace and composure she had shown in the diner. She gave thoughtful interviews, redirecting the focus to the underlying message. Talent and potential are everywhere. You just have to look in unconventional places. It's not about where you start, but what you do with what you have. She refused to feed the speculation about Sterling Cross or the details of the fraud, maintaining the discretion that Julian so highly valued. Her story was inspirational, a living testament to the fact that true strength reveals itself in the most unexpected situations. From her new, spacious office with a panoramic view of the Boston skyline, Carmen Morales felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just a pretty view, it was the materialization of every sacrifice, every sleepless night. Her days were now filled with meetings with philanthropists and community leaders, crafting social impact projects, and steering a foundation with the resources to truly change lives. As her first major initiative as president of the Thorne Foundation, Carmen launched Project Lighthouse. It wasn't just a fund, it was the fulfillment of her own interrupted dream. A massive scholarship and financial support fund for low-income students who were forced to drop out of nursing and other healthcare programs due to financial or family hardship, just like her. It was a chance to give others what she had almost lost, a beacon of hope for those who had fallen through the cracks of the system. Isabella was thriving on her new treatment regimen. Her lungs were stronger, her energy vibrant. She could run and play without the exhaustion that had haunted her. She loved visiting Carmen's office, watching the city from high above, her eyes wide with wonder. Carmen had finally found the peace of mind she had fought so hard for. She wasn't just saving her sister. She had the power and the resources of the millionaire who employed her to save countless other lives. The waitress had become an architect of futures. Julian Thorne, the ruthless corporate raider, once seen only as a bottom-line tycoon, was redefined to the world as a visionary, a man who saw value where no one else did. His reputation had been transformed. One evening, he stopped by Carmen's darkened office, looking at the diagrams and plans for Project Lighthouse she had left on the whiteboard. "Impressive," he said, his usual gruffness softened by a tone of genuine satisfaction. "You aren't just managing the foundation, Ms. Morales. You are remaking it. You are building something new." Carmen turned to him, a small warm smile on her lips, a smile once reserved only for Isabella. "You taught me to look for the disease in a system, Mr. Thorne. The system that allows people with the desire and the talent to heal others to fall through the cracks or to be exploited is sick. I'm just performing a little triage, applying the right medicine." Julian looked out the window at the glittering lights of Boston below, an endless sea of human lives stretching out as far as the eye could see. He had spent his life acquiring things, buildings, companies, wealth. But in hiring Carmen Morales, the waitress he had watched from his dark corner booth, he had made his first and only truly priceless acquisition. He had found someone who could not just manage a crisis, but could build a legacy. The waitress from the diner had not only changed her own life, in the end, she had changed his, proving that true strength, true genius, and true potential can be found in the most unexpected places, and that real-world experience often trumps any degree or pedigree. This is the story of Carmen Morales, a resilient waitress from Boston's South End, whose life dedicated to her sick sister taught her to maintain extraordinary calm under pressure. After defusing an armed robbery with astonishing serenity, she catches the eye of Julian Thorne, a reclusive and ruthless millionaire. Julian offers Carmen a golden ticket, a high-level position at his Thorne Industries, launching her into a corporate world of skyscrapers and sharks. There, Carmen uses her emotional intelligence and intuitive skills to outmaneuver arrogant rivals and unravel an intricate web of corruption threatening her mentor's very empire. Her journey culminates in the downfall of the corrupt Sterling Cross and her rise to lead the Thorne Foundation, where she not only transforms her own life and her sister's, but also establishes a legacy of supporting human potential, proving that true strength lies in those who refuse to give up, no matter where they come from. If you were inspired by Carmen's journey and the power of human potential, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories, and leave your comment below on what you thought of this incredible twist of fate. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that true strength shows up in the most unexpected places. See you next time.